Welcome to Boardroom Books, a podcast where I break down the stories of history's greatest companies and their founders by reading great history books. Today we're learning about William Rosenberg and his rags to riches story of dropping out in 8th grade, then going on to found the Dunkin' Donuts empire and basically become the godfather of franchising. I read Rosenberg's book Time to Make the Donuts, which he wrote at age 84 from his home in Cape Cod. And it's an autobiography that starts all the way back with his poor family. He moved 4 different times around the poor Dorchester area of Boston. He had 3 siblings. He was the second oldest, so relatively big family, but never had much money. His dad owned a grocery store, so they always had food, but not much money. His dad left school at 6th grade to work, and his mom couldn't really read or spell, so they were not highly educated, but they were hardworking, street-smart people. The biggest takeaway he had from his dad was that reputation, not money, is the most important thing in the entire world. For his entire life, he lives by this principle that I will never compromise on what I believe, and I will always hold myself to a standard of excellence. And that all goes back to his dad teaching him that reputation is the single most important thing in the world. As young as age 3, people could tell this kid is an incredible salesman. As a 3-year-old, he'd pedal his trike around the neighborhood, helping his grandpa sell ice, and he increased his grandpa's ice sales like crazy. As a 9-year-old, when his dad would have surplus produce that was going to go bad, he'd hit the streets and sell people on going to buy a watermelon for their drive home. And people would come in off the street and go, that kid is really good at sales. He's going to be incredible later on in his life. He has all the basic ingredients that make up a phenomenal entrepreneur. He has a great quote in the book where he says, from an early age, if I put my mind to it and worked hard at it, I could do whatever I was doing as well or better than most. I learned to strive for excellence. If I really believed I could do something and had the proper attitude and was there to serve the people, I could succeed. At 12 years old, he gets what I would consider his first real job. He works at a grocery store, and he delivers groceries after school from 3:30 to 7 p.m., and eventually also starts working 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. before school. He called this working from can't see to can't see, sun up to sundown. Thursday and Saturday, he'd work all the way till 11 p.m. This kid was a grinder. On his bar mitzvah, he was Jewish, the day where he became a man, the biggest birthday party of his life. He had to leave his own birthday party early to go back to work. That was his introduction to manhood, never-ending work. By 8th grade, he realizes, my family is getting into a lot of debt, and my dad isn't really doing the necessary work to pay the bills each day and provide for the family. He had a lot of lofty goals, but wasn't normally willing to live in the day-to-day and actually put food on the table. So Bill decides, as an 8th grader, to drop out of school, get a job, and help provide for his family. That 8th grade education is the last formal education Bill Rosenberg would ever receive, and he still goes on to accomplish so much. When he drops out of school, he goes and he gets a job at the Western Union Telegram Company, a company that receives telegraphs from around the world and then prints them off, hands them to a delivery boy, and the delivery guy will run it out to one of the businesses in the area. So Bill, as a delivery boy, got paid on commission. Every telegram he earned, he'd get money. So he learned how to get everywhere in Boston super, super fast. All the shortcuts, all the ways to hold on to a truck or streetcar to make his bike go faster. He became the absolute best delivery boy in the company. To the point that when a big company in Boston said, whichever company gets us the fastest service, we will exclusively use them, the boss told him, all right, kid, you are my fastest guy. Here's the letters for this company. You have to get them there as fast as possible. And he won them this big account because he was so good at delivering telegrams. That experience taught him a guiding principle that he ran the rest of his businesses by. The customer is the boss. The customer decides to hire you, not the other way around. So everything you do has to have them at the top of the org chart. Eventually, at around age 17, after working for the telegram company for 3 years, he wants a better paying job. So he quits and gets a job at an ice cream company called Simcoe. And he starts selling ice cream out of an ice cream truck. It's a seasonal job. Ice cream sells in the summer, but not the winter. But he figures, hey, I can take up some odd jobs in the off season. And since I'm making double the money during the summer, it'll be worth it. When he gets hired, they give him the worst ice cream route in the company. They say, drive these streets. These have the lowest average sales of any of the routes that we have. but he figures out how to sell to the people there, and he actually makes it into one of the best routes in the company. So the next summer, when he comes back, instead of giving him the worst route, they realize this guy's a winner. Let's give him a great route. And he takes a great route and makes it the second best route in the ice cream company. He ends up really settling in at this company. He marries the sister-in-law of the main accountant detail person at the company. So now he's 19 years old, he's married, and he's working his way up in the company. And in the off season, after 2 years of being a phenomenal salesman, the owner of the company, Harry Simberg, decides to put him in charge of an ice cream store instead of ice cream trucks. So he learns how to manage people a little bit. The next summer, they open an ice cream branch over in a neighboring state, Connecticut, and he gets sent over there to develop all the ice cream routes there, and he does a phenomenal job. Such a good job that he actually gets put in charge of the entire Connecticut branch of the ice cream company. He learns how to manage all the people in that branch. This is the first point where he starts to realize, I'm not only good at selling, I'm also good at organizing and understanding people. He says that he became a bit of an amateur psychologist, understanding people's motivations, their problems, and how to meet them where they were at. The next off-season, after he became a Connecticut manager, the owner of that business was a bit of a serial entrepreneur. He had the ice cream company and several other endeavors. So he takes Bill Rosenberg, this sales guy who he knows is a winner, and he puts him in a different business he owns, vending machines. He owns this company where they buy vending machines, they put them in factories and collect the money and then pay the factory or the school where they have the vending machine a little bit of the profit. So Bill Rosenberg starts going around to all these factories and schools and bowling alleys and gas stations and selling them vending machines. And this cements it for him. He gives this quote where he says, "By now it became clear that I had enormous ability as a starter, a builder of routes. I was the one who got things going. Once I did, we'd turn the routes over to other people, and I'd start the process again somewhere else." So this guy is an excellent salesman, especially going from no sales to an initial amount, and he's very good at understanding people and managing them. So he's gaining traction, he's gaining momentum at this ice cream company and then the adjacent vending machine company. And then he starts to get frustrated because the owner of the company never really learned how to share with his employees. He didn't pay people well. He assumed that his people would figure out how to provide for themselves, steal a little extra if they needed it. And so I'm just going to pay the minimum amount possible. So Bill Rosenberg gets frustrated and goes and finds a better job. Another sales job that will literally pay him double what he was making at the ice cream place. He says, consequently, I, Bill, learned to do just the opposite, to share with people. That's why I'm passionate about franchising. It is a means of conducting business based on the fundamental concept of sharing. This idea of treat others super well and they will make you money too, that sticks with him as he goes on to build his business empire. So he leaves, gets another job, but Harry, the owner, wants him back. He knows he's a winner, he can sell. So he says, "Hey, I'll match your double pay. I'll buy you a car. Come back and help me out. I have a problem with the vending machine company. I bought a bunch of really expensive, fancy refrigerated vending machines, and I can't sell them. And they're super expensive having my inventory this high, and I need them gone." So Bill comes back, and he starts placing vending machines all over Connecticut and all these big factories. Again, this guy's a winner. You hand him a problem, he figures out how to make connections, make opportunities happen, use his good looks and understanding of people to make sales. And as he's out selling all these vending machines, Pearl Harbor gets bombed and the US gets thrust into World War II. And so now Bill, with a young family, realizes selling vending machines is not a particularly essential job. I need to find a job that will prevent me from getting drafted and having to leave my family. So he goes to a shipyard where they were building US naval ships south of Boston, and he applies. And they say, "Okay, we'll take you on. You can be a handyman and we'll give you minimum wage." And he goes, "Are you kidding? I have a refrigerator engineer's license." Now, for context, some of the vending machines he sold were refrigerated vending machines. They had ice cream in them. So he studied a book that explained how you fix these machines and passed a test so that he could have a little certification paper that said, "I am a refrigerator engineer." But he never actually fixed one of these vending machines a day in his life. But he showed the interviewer this refrigerator engineer license, which he got by reading a book. And the guy said, "What does this qualify you for?" And Bill goes, "Plumbing or electrical?" The interviewer says, "Which one do you want?" And Bill says, I'll take electrical. And bam, he's hired at the highest pay level in the entire shipyard as an electrician. And the hiring manager says, I'm going to put you on some complicated jobs because your experience is phenomenal. This guy, just because of a little insanity, got into a crazy position and he's in way over his head. On the first day, the manager of the electricians sees him and is like, this guy's full of it. So he sends him off to some job. He gets shocked with a bunch of electricity and realizes, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. But because the manager likes him so much, he actually just lets him shadow one of the best electricians in the department, and he learns how to do the electrical work on the ships. Hustle, persistence, and a little insanity creates these opportunities for him. So as he's doing electrical work that he just learned by following a guy around, he starts looking for another lateral move to make more money. And he switches into being, get this, a labor union delegate. Because if you're in the labor union, you automatically got paid as much as the top paid guy in the department you are representing. So he realizes that's phenomenal money, and it's all about managing people, which I'm really good at. So he gets into the union and refuses to play politics. He just plays the straight and narrow way. He has principles, he's going to stand by them, finds people, figures out what they want, and gets stuff done. He makes sure that his credibility is super, super strong. And as a result, he does a phenomenal job leading a labor union. He figures out how contracts work and gets all of his people underneath him paid as much as possible. He figures out what his superiors want and adjusts systems or finds ways to train workers for temporary skills so that they can remove bottlenecks in the manufacturing process. He does a phenomenal job here. So he never gets drafted because he does such a good job at the shipyard. And eventually, as the war is wrapping up, the shipyard wants to promote him even more, but at this point, Bill starts to get the entrepreneurial itch. He's been an employee for 11 years now. 11 years before he jumped off on his own. He didn't just get into high school and go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go start a business. No, he figured out how to work hard and let his confidence snowball over time. And now he says, I had a fire in my belly, the essential ingredient that all entrepreneurs must have to go out on my own. He's ready to jump off and launch his own company. But before we talk about that, please give this episode a 5-star rating or hit the like button just real quick, because I'm new to podcasting and every rating or like that you leave massively increases the odds of somebody else seeing and learning from this content. So Bill is getting ready to launch his own company. At first, a couple guys keep calling him up and saying, hey, can you please come work for us? Can you please partner up with us? Because his reputation is so good. These two guys own a deli, and then they started this thing called the Industrial Luncheon service. They'd load their deli food onto a few trucks, drive the trucks over to a factory, and sell the factory workers breakfast and lunch before and during their shift. Bill looks at the business and goes, this is pretty cool. I'll partner up with you guys and start selling new factories on the food trucks. But he very quickly realizes, shoot, these guys are very dishonest. He says they weren't interested in building a long-term business. They were only interested in a fast buck, buying their wives mink coats and driving Cadillacs. He gets cold feet. He's like, I got to get out of this company. They're not paying me. They're doing a bad job. They're prioritizing themselves. So he loses money on this exit, but he's okay with losing money and time because his reputation is the single most important thing he owns. Same thing his dad taught him back as a kid. He realizes, this food truck thing where you load food onto a vehicle and you go sell it to factory workers is a great business. So I'm going to go open an industrial luncheon service, but in Boston. So he moves back to Boston and is like, I'm going to do this food truck thing, but I'm going to do it right. He says, you don't build a business, you build an organization. It's all about the group of people who you assemble around the task. I get to hire and fire. I'm going to run things right and build a great group of people. So he calls up the old accountant controller guy from the ice cream company he used to work at, and they decide to partner up. Accountant gets 25% of the equity, Bill gets 75%, and they decide to work together. Bill's going to be the salesman manager, and this accountant's going to handle the details and numbers. And he starts the business. They rent out a big garage. They park the trucks there overnight, and every morning they fill them up with food and coffee and stuff. They drive the trucks off to a factory and sell the food off these trucks to the factory workers before, after, during the shifts. And he knows, going into this, that the biggest thing in the company is going to be coffee. At least 40%. 40%. 4 out of 10 things in the company, it's going to be coffee. And he realizes, As far as I'm concerned, he says it was necessary to get the finest cup of coffee that money could get. He becomes obsessed with getting the highest quality, the best coffee he possibly could. So he looks all around the city, all around the country, and he finds the best blend of coffee he can get commercially. Then he goes up to these coffee people, he wheels and deals with them, and he manages to get them to sell the coffee to him at the best volume rate they can, as if he was buying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of orders from them. But he only buys a few. He gets a discount. He does the same thing for cream and milk. He says, hey, we're going to get so big eventually and be such a good customer that you got to give us a discount today just so you get our business. And they go with it. After all this work of hustling up the best coffee blend and the best creamers and the best milk that he possibly can, he has a phenomenal cup of coffee, and he wants to sell it for 10 cents a cup. Thing is, in the 1940s, every other coffee company in Boston was selling their coffee for 5 cents a cup. And everybody else says, you're out of your mind. The market rate is 5 cents a cup. No one's going to pay double that for a cup of coffee. He looks at all them and goes, you can't sell good coffee for 5 cents. You have to get 10 cents a cup to get the good ingredients. And this is where some of his positive mental attitude, his we can totally do this, comes out. He never liked people who just said, this is how we do it. It can't be done that way. He always said, if it should be done this way, let's just do it this way. So he does it. They launch the food trucks with 10 cent per cup coffee. The first day, they park their food truck at a factory where there's a competing food truck right next to them. And they tell everyone in line for the other food truck, hey, come try our coffee and we won't charge you for it. If you think it's good, pay us 10 cents. And so people start coming over trying the free coffee. A line forms for the free coffee. And then when new people walk up, they see truck with cheap coffee and no line, truck with 10-cent coffee and a line of people, and they all get in the big line. And all of a sudden, his truck has customers, and they get a reputation for having the best coffee and the best food around because he cares so much about quality and reputation. So company starts to grow. Great food, great coffee, quality obsessed. Every morning they're up at like 2 a.m. making and packaging all the food and throwing it into the trucks. Trucks go out to the factories and they do this every single day. As the founder, his one goal is playing into his strength, canvassing, selling new factories on food trucks. He's such a good salesman that he just sells and sells and sells and sells. And eventually things start to break. We don't have enough trucks anymore. Okay, better go fix that. We can't even service all the people who are coming to our trucks because so many people want this food. Okay, well, better fix that. But in the early days of his business, the list of priorities was sell more customers, keep selling more customers until something in the way we run the business breaks, fix the broken thing, then repeat step one. And because he was such a good 0 to 1 salesman, which he learned through selling ice cream, newspapers, watermelons as a kid, vending machines, ice, anything, he's able to apply that to this business and have a really quick takeoff. This is a hard season. This is the most discouraged he's ever been in his life because every single day he's out there waking up and going out and hunting down the thing that's going to pay him and feed his family at night. But he also loves it. He creates a culture of extreme loyalty. He treats his people super well. Any supervisor got paid both a commission based on all the profit the people below them made and got a base salary equal to the highest paid person they were managing. So that way they never got frustrated about getting promoted. They always got the same salary from before plus commission based on their department. He always gave a big Christmas bonus to all his employees. They always ran great parties at Thanksgiving or Christmas for all their employees. They didn't exactly have no employee problems, but they had phenomenal employee loyalty. This guy cared about quality. This guy was a master salesman, and he cared about treating people well. A great story about this is that at some point, after a couple years of expanding, they move into a new garage, and the driveway to the garage kind of slopes down up to the door, and they park all their trucks inside. And one day, there's a huge snowstorm, and it snows in that sloped driveway, and they can't get the trucks out of the garage. And so that day, because they couldn't shovel all the snow out in time, all the food went bad on the trucks, and they had a day of no revenue. Bad day. A few weeks later, another snowstorm hits. He wakes up at like 1 a.m. and is like, we gotta get down there. I'm gonna shovel the snow myself. So at 3:30 a.m., he trudges through this snowstorm himself to get a shovel. He shows up at the garage, and one of his employees had gotten there early himself, paid a bunch of his neighborhood boys to come out with him and shovel the snow off the driveway. Because he knew, in order to do this, I have to make the sacrifice to help the company stay afloat. Bill said that, quote, the loyalty was heartrending. The employees stood behind me and made sure we didn't get hurt. We loved each other and cared for each other. So this food truck business keeps growing and growing and growing, super quality food, super good operations, master salesman at the helm, and a loyal, people-focused internal culture. Expand, 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 all the way up to 100 plus trucks, 44,000 square foot food factory. They start putting cafeterias inside factories, not just driving food trucks up to the factory because both are good and both play into their supply chain strengths. This is a big company after about 8-10 years of working on it. And as they're expanding this company, he meets a guy named Herb Carlo. Herb is the guy who supplies them the bread that they use for all their sandwiches and everything in their company. And Herb tells him, you guys right now are already using the best supplier in the world for your yeast-raised donuts. But your cake donuts stink. You need to go get these people for your cake donut mix. And so Bill goes, great. He goes and he switches a supplier. And he says, at this point, we now have both the best yeast donuts around and the best cake donuts around. We are doing phenomenal business in the donut area. And this is when he first realizes the power of his donut business. 40% of his revenue in a food truck cafeteria company is from donuts and coffee. 40% of a full-on cafeteria company of their revenue comes from donuts and coffee. And when he realizes this, he says, we need to make sure our donuts are phenomenal. So he creates a whole separate donut department in the company to start making sure the donuts are high quality and turned out at speed. This is the start of what later branches out to become Dunkin' Donuts. He goes and he finds one of their donut suppliers, and he gets the guy who manages it. His name's Alvin, and he says, hey, come over, work for me. Run my donut company. And he does this a lot, by the way. Whenever he runs into a problem, whenever he runs into a thing he wants to build, he goes, who else is already doing this? How can I either copy them or steal the people who are doing it for them? And this is a great example. But this guy, Alvin, who used to run a donut company, now he comes in to run the donut department for Bill Rosenberg at his cafeteria company. He's a bit of a problem. He's kind of a drunkard. He fights with a lot of people. He's hurting employee morale. So Bill takes this guy out to lunch because he's really good at understanding people and figuring out what to do with them and where to put them. And as he's talking to Alvin, Alvin tells Bill that when he worked for this other Puritan donut company, they had a whole bunch of food trucks out selling donuts like the current model, but they also had a little retail donut store in front of the donut plant. And that one little store made more money than all 12 of the trucks put together. And Bill, being in the food truck business, realizes, wait a second, if I could open a shop that makes 12x the money of one of my trucks, that's a huge opportunity. I already have a factory and whole system of making the food. If I just switch the way I'm selling it, profits will go up like crazy. And he realizes, I can take Alvin, who's frustrating everyone in the back room with all the donuts, and kind of give him his own little fiefdom, running a separate store on his own. Understands the person, figures out where to put him, and sees an opportunity. So he sets up a little donut store in Nantucket. And his accountant partner, he hates the idea. We have enough problems as it is. What do we need a donut store for? But Bill is convinced we need this donut store. He goes, look at this other donut guy in town. They've got 2 shops, and the owner of 2 little donut stores is building a $1 million home nearby here. And this is in like 1940s dollars. This is a really nice house from owning 2 donut stores. If that's the kind of money in donut stores, we gotta get on board with this. So he pushes his way through with his founder energy. And they open their first donut store in Nantucket on Memorial Day weekend of 1950. And that first donut store is called Open Kettle. Within a year, Open Kettle is doing numbers. But Alvin, that guy who started it, it's kind of a problem. He jumped ship. Bill goes and hires a couple of buddies he knew when he worked at the Boston Shipyard, puts them in charge of it, and the store's numbers triple because those guys are so good at both managing people and being friendly with customers, while at the same time upholding Bill's ruthless standards for perfect donuts and perfect coffee. Open Kettle was unique because there were other donut shops at this time, but they were the first donut shop that wasn't just a come in, grab your donuts and leave store. They actually put chairs and coffee in the donut shop. Most donut stores didn't sell drinks along with donuts. Most donut stores only sold 4 donuts: a cake donut, a jelly donut, a yeast-raised one, and an old-fashioned donut. But he wanted more varieties. In his head, you could run a special every single week of the year and have 50 plus different sorts of donuts in the store. So they had huge variety. They had drinks and donuts. They had seating inside the store, and they were still selling the absolute best coffee he possibly could. This guy, I'll tell you more about this in a bit, but he was ruthless about quality coffee. So they keep expanding, they keep growing as they improve the first store they opened. They remodel it, they improve the processes. The numbers double again, up to about $5,500 a week at the time. They changed the name of the store to Dunkin' Donuts. The name literally just came out of a random conference room brainstorming session. And once they have that first Dunkin' Donut store operating at peak capacity with a great physical design and really good processes and good people in the store, they start to expand. They open 2, 3 Dunkin' stores in total, all with the same process, all owned by this industrial luncheon services. And as they're opening the 4th store, he starts to run into a problem. We need financing. We're running out of cash to open these stores on our own. And banks don't want to finance a silly little one-product donut shop. Kind of reminds me, I did a project in school about Todd Graves and Raising Cane's. Nobody believed in his little one-product chicken finger restaurant. So he worked for his own cash to start his first business. And then he had all these really creative ways of financing and using cash from one business, one store to start the next one, so that he could open stores on financing. What Bill Rosenberg has to do is come up with a creative way to finance buying land and putting a Dunkin' Donuts on it. The way he does it is he comes to the person who already owns the land and says, "Hey, Mr. Landlord, could you build a building for us? We want you to pay for the building." Here's how it'll work, though. You get a loan for the building and use the land that you're building it on as collateral for the loan. So of course they'll get approved. They're building on a piece of land they own. Then we will rent the building back from you. And we're going to pay you back at whatever it costs you to build the building plus 10%. So the landlord gets a building on his land and he gets a great tenant who's going to pay him back at cost plus 10% triple net. So now Dunkin' is getting other people to build and finance stores for them who are happy to do it because they're getting a stable tenant who's paying them cost plus 10% for the building while increasing the value of their land. Great financing strategy. This is how Dunkin' finances the vast majority of their early and middle expansion as a company and later a franchise system. So now Dunkin' is up to 5 stores, 3 initial corporate ones, 2 more under this new financing strategy. And the accountant, who initially was like, "Why would we open a donut shop? We don't need any more problems." He starts to really like the business. He realizes there's less selling to factories, there's less key man risk of what if Bill Rosenberg dies? We won't have him to sell anymore. That's not the case with the donut shops. So the accountant is very happy with the 5 stores they have and doesn't really want to open any more. But Bill says, "I'm not content to rest on my laurels." He has this great quote where he says, "Good enough wasn't good enough for me. I saw we had a good thing going. Consequently, I wanted to expand in a big way before someone else did." He has what I would call founder fire. His partners are very content to keep the status quo and keep winning their little game. But Bill is never happy to just sit still. He always wants to grow. He always wants to launch something new, to improve, to get better. So as he's eyeing the expansion from 5 donut shops to more, he hops in the car for 6 weeks and drives all around America to visit other donut shops and see how do we at Dunkin' Donuts compare to our competition around the country. And nobody was quite doing what Dunkin' Donuts was doing. First, there were very few chains. There were a couple of donut chains like Krispy Kreme down in North Carolina and a couple of little ones over in Los Angeles. Almost everyone was only selling 4 kinds of donuts, not of wide variety. Almost none of them were drive-in stores because they were just expected walk in, walk out. And very few people were combining donuts with coffee or beverages. And yet, all these other donut shops, not catering to cars, not serving coffee, not serving a variety of donuts, were still doing super, super well. He grasps that there's a huge opportunity here that we've capitalized on already. We have to get out here and expand. And after the 6-week road trip, he comes back all excited about, look, we have this great thing. Nobody else is doing it. We need to grow. And his accountant business partner thinks, you're crazy. We are not doing this. And it starts to cause a bit of a divide between them. At first, having the accountant and the salesman as partners was necessary, but now it's causing unnecessary friction and slowing things down, and the counterbalance is no longer helpful, it's hurtful. And so, unfortunately, he and his accountant partner end up splitting, and there's a whole messy lawsuits and breaking up of equity and all of this. And he ends up with the Dunkin' Donuts name and a broken system that he has to restart from zero. He's totally done with partnerships now. As he starts to rebuild the Dunkin' Donuts brand after the 2 years of wrestling with his partner to split the equity, some other guy comes up to him and goes, hey, I could help you with all this. I have experience in this other restaurant industry. Why don't you make me a partner? And Bill Rosenberg says, I need partners like I need holes in my head. He's completely fed up with partners after having an accountant penny-pinching non-visionary partner. He wants to run and run at his speed. This is when he really leans into franchising. He develops a whole system for how do you open a new store? What are the criteria for opening it? How do you do donuts? How do you do coffee? Who are the suppliers? He is one of the first people in America to actually use a franchise model where a company creates a whole system of rules and regulations for how to run a company, hands that off to another business person, and that other business person just follows the instructions and reports back to the mothership. And this worked because Bill Rosenberg had such high standards for his system. There's this awesome story as they are early in the stages of opening franchises. And I'm just going to read straight out of the book here. He says, on one of my typical jaunts out in the field, I stopped into the store in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, and I checked the products. They were awful. The donuts were greasy. They didn't look good. I said to the woman at the counter, where's the franchise operator? She told me that he was home. She gave me his number and I called him. I told him who I was, president of Dunkin' Donuts, and that I was down at his store. These products are horrible, I said. You better come down here. He said, I've been there all day. I'm not coming back. You'd better come back, I said, because I'm going to throw these donuts in the barrel. You can't do that, he said. I can't. You watch me. He hung up. I hung up. Then I took all the baskets out of the cases and threw the donuts into the barrel. The salesperson kept saying, what are we going to have to sell? And I said, you're going to have to make fresh donuts because you can't sell these. The franchisee came running into the store. He saw what I was doing. He got so upset. You can't do that. This is my store. I said, my friend, that's our name up there. You can't sell this product under that name. You're doing the thing we told you just can't do. There is nothing wrong with making a bad batch of donuts. Nothing wrong with making an error. Anyone can make a mistake. But you never make our customers pay for your error. Literally dumps donuts in the trash because they're bad. And he forces this guy to remake them. It's a whole ordeal. He does the same thing with coffee at a different franchise. He comes in, the coffee is wrong. He goes into the back, demands that the worker show him exactly how they make the coffee. There's a tiny issue in the process where they're using a slightly different sort of water and creamer than he recommends. And he just loses it. Why in the world are you doing it this way? This is not how we do it at Dunkin' Donuts. Absolutely detail, quality obsessed. Meanwhile, as the donut company is starting to expand and open franchise stores here, there, and everywhere, and he's super in the details, his original company of the food trucks is starting to shrink. He sees the writing on the wall that food truck catering is going to start to die soon. He tries to help the industry and get together with other business owners who are in similar things and combine forces to do something good, but it doesn't really work. Meanwhile, the donut business is booming to the point where between the two companies, he's becoming very wealthy. He's got houses all over the country. He'll spend his winters in southern Florida, gets really good at golf and dancing with his wife. Super passionate guy. Whatever he gets into, whether it's business or a hobby, he's always all in and wants to be excellent at it. So now that he's kind of getting wealthy, Dunkin's getting big, the other company's starting to wind down, things are hitting escape velocity. So he starts to restructure and he puts all the companies that he owns under this umbrella corporation, Universal Food Systems, because eventually he wants to do an IPO and go public so that he can collect the cash and kind of sit back on the sidelines. As he's doing this, he starts an interesting little side quest. In 1959, he and one of his executives go to a trade show in New York called Start Your Own Business. And everyone who attended complained and hated the show. The show was supposed to be about franchising, companies who could help you start your own company. But man, the show's a joke, and the government hates franchising, and the people here don't understand how to work with the government. The thing is, at this time, franchising was a brand new idea. Not a lot of places were doing it. And because it was a new idea, a lot of fast buck sort of people got into it. People who would exploit the franchising idea to make lots of money and then have horrible systems and then horrible businesses. It's kind of like how the dot-com bubble happened in the 90s, or crypto and Web3 a few years back, or even some sectors of AI right now, where you get people who, instead of trying to build something that lasts, just build something for money. And so, because of all these shady people milking this franchising business model, the government started to pass a lot of legislation that really hurt franchisors. Franchising was a dirty word. If you said, "I'm in franchising," people basically thought you're a scammer. So now, just like when he was a union leader at the shipyard, he hears a problem and he wants to solve it and get the right people in the room. So at this conference, he gets all the best business people in the conference and he says, "Hey guys, we all need to group up and form a franchise association so that we can lobby the government to pass better legislation, so that we can help each other do better business and help local governments and municipalities work with us and our businesses." He founds this thing called the International Franchise Association at that convention, and he later becomes the president of that association and builds it into something really solid. So solid that today, this is the primary supporting association for franchising around the world. Franchising represents 50% of American retail transactions. Half of American retail is done in some sort of franchise business. And most of those businesses look back to this body called the International Franchise Association that was started and chaired by Bill Rosenberg. He both built Dunkin and the support system for lots of other future franchising. Because of this, he meets some really cool people. There's this guy who comes up to him when he's the president of the Franchise Association and says, "Hey, I've got a couple of these hamburger restaurants. I'm calling it Burger King. If you give me $150,000, you can have half the equity in my company." He turned him down. 8 months later, that $150,000 investment would have been worth $8 million. Brutal. He says, "Frankly, smart guy that I am, I'm actually a dummy. I had an opportunity to own 50% of Burger King for $150,000 or less and didn't take it." Another cool guy that he meets, there's some guy who comes and meets him at a Dunkin' Donuts store. And he says, "Hey, I've got a couple of sandwich stores. Can you give me some advice on how to run the sandwich stores?" So Bill looks at the stores and he says, "Well, you should have parking lots like this. And you should really set up a franchise model. And here's how you do it." That guy was Fred DeLuca, the founder of a little store called Subway. So Bill Rosenberg not only founded Dunkin' Donuts, but he also had a hand in the foundation of a lot of modern franchising. So he not only was instrumental in his own business empire, but in a lot of the business systems that have shaped America and the world as we know it. Meanwhile, after this, he also finds all sorts of creative ways to expand Dunkin' Donuts. One of my favorite ones that he did was he would go into a supermarket, and as he looked around the supermarket, he realized these supermarket managers, they have one main metric: profit per square foot. So he went up to a manager and said, "Hey, look at this blank wall after people leave their checkout aisle, but before they go to their car. They're not spending any money in this square footage. What if we put a little kiosk with cases of donuts and a coffee set up right there? Now you're making money off this blank square footage." Of course the people said yes. And so now Dunkin' Donuts starts to sell donuts and coffee after checkout lanes in grocery stores. And now Krispy Kreme and Dunkin' Donuts do this in supermarkets all over the world. He started this trend. Around this time in 1960, they sell all the trucks and close the original mobile industrial luncheon business. So after 15 years of doing the food truck and cafeteria business, he closes it down. This is interesting just because businesses do have a shelf life. The window of opportunity for a lot of things in the market is great at one time and closes at another. He realized that. He was in one market, he saw the donut thing, he grew the donut thing as the other one faded out. So he still had businesses going the whole time. It just wasn't always the exact same stable vehicle. So eventually, he's finally ready to take the company public after a couple other funny little escapades in his life, like going to Duke University and constantly dieting down on his weight. They get Price Waterhouse to be the accountant. This is back when the accounting firms were the big eight, so it was just Price Waterhouse. They recommended, hey, you guys should change your name from Universal Food Systems to Dunkin' Donuts Incorporated because people will recognize the Dunkin' Donuts name. By this point in time, this is, 5-6 years after the Franchise Association starts, franchises have switched from being a slimy thing that no one wants to touch to being the hot topic. They were like internet stocks were in the early 2000s. They would trade for 10 or 20 times the earning potential. So Dunkin' plans, we're going to go public at 20 times our earnings per share, about $20 a share. Then the chairman of Payne Weber, a massive investment bank, which is now a subset of UBS, he comes up to the Dunkin' guys and says, hey, we don't think that $20 per share is the correct amount to IPO at. You should go out at $15 a share. The chairman of one of the biggest investment banks in the world tells you your IPO is priced wrong. Change it. Normally, if you are a sane business person, you listen to this guy. But Bill Rosenberg gets mad and he tells the chairman of one of the biggest investment banks in the world, you ought to know better than that. You haven't done your homework on our stock. And this guy's like, what do you mean we haven't done our homework? You ever heard of McDonald's? KFC? They went out at 20 times earnings. Now they're trading at 60 times earnings. Dunkin' is the same category of stock, and we are going to go out at 20x earnings. Do your homework and then come back to me. And all of his C-suite is like, dude, you just destroyed our IPO. If that investment bank doesn't like what you said, we're absolutely cooked. But Bill says, mark my words, the investment bank will call me up within 2 days and apologize. And that happens. A day and a half later, the chairman of Payne Weber calls him up and says, yeah, we didn't actually do our homework. You're right. $20 a share is good. That's an incredible level of self-confidence in his company and in his research. They end up IPOing in 1968. They go out at $20 a share and they close at $26 a share on the first day. And very quickly, after some stock splits within the first year, they were trading right in line with McDonald's and KFC at $60 to $66 a share. That puts a $6 million check in his pocket in 1968. An 8th grade dropout has in today's money, $55 million check just dropped in his pocket. I'm going to end a lot of the story right there. There is several other really interesting things that went on in his life, including health struggles with cancer and dieting, a whole situation of bringing his son into the company and injecting him straight into the president role of the entire company as a 25-year-old, and a little bit of a bumpy leadership transition there. A whole other side quest of starting a horse farm and betting on horse racing and improving the entire horse racing industry. But suffice to say, this 8th grade dropout succeeded because of a few big things. Reputation above all else, quality, ruthlessly caring about details, and pursuing what he believed was right. A positive mental attitude, a can-do attitude. He never really took no for an answer. He understood people and figured out how to work with them well, even the ones who were tough to love. The customer was always right. Whatever the customer needed, they were the boss. You do what will help them. And he just had this internal motor that never turned off. He worked at first because he wanted to provide for his family. Then he worked because he wanted to grow the company. He ended his life by working because he loved what he did. Now, before you go, if this was a valuable episode for you, please take a second and post about it on one of your social media feeds. Because the only way a podcast like this is going to grow is through word of mouth. And if you found it valuable, your friends who follow your social media will probably also find it valuable.